provocative revelation. Imagine unearthing a secret so profound it could shatter the conventional understanding of Jesus. A remarkable discovery by a Goldsmith points to a life beyond the Gospels, revealing untold aspects of his message. This isn't just history, it's a revelation that could change everything.
That's right.
Not just a crowd, not just listeners, but pioneers. Folks who are done just skimming the surface, who are tired of the same old, same old. People who sense there's a whole other level to this thing we call life, and they're ready to map it out for themselves. So, let me put this straight to you, my fellow pioneers. What if everything you thought you knew about Jesus was just the trailer? We've all seen the highlight reel, the Gospels, the parables, the miracles. It's all good, it's powerful stuff. But what about the stuff that got left on the cutting room floor? I'm talking about the deep, underground, unplugged version of the Christ message that the organized scene just wasn't ready for. Joel dug that. He cracked the code on a Jesus that the world has, for the most part, totally slept on. This ain't about a guy from history. This is about a state of consciousness that is your actual birthright. We're about to dive deep into Goldsmith's biggest flex, the secret of the silenced Jesus. This is the real deal that goes way beyond the Gospels. So, if you're ready to have your entire worldview flipped, to find a power within you that you never knew was there, then you need to stick around, because what comes next is going to blow the roof clean off. And hey, if this hits home for you, do us a solid like the video. Drop a comment with the symbolic number 777 if you're tapping into this new frequency, and subscribe to keep journeying with us. The best is yet to come. Because what comes next is going to blow the roof clean off. Let's get right into the first cornerstone of this entire revelation, what I like to call the gospel gap. And now think about it, we got these 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. We treat him like the whole story, the final cut, the director's definitive version. But what if they're not? What if they're just the greatest hits album? Everybody knows the singles, the big crowd-pleasing miracles. But the real, deep, gritty, transformative beat sides, the stuff that would have really shaken the foundations of the entire power structure, that got left in the vault. Joel Goldsmith was like that friend who somehow got a hold of the unreleased studio sessions. He wasn't interested in just reading the liner notes to us. He was pointing to the spaces between the verses. He was asking the questions that nobody else was asking. Like, okay, Jesus is out there healing and teaching, but what was he really imparting to his inner circle when the crowds weren't around? When the cameras were off? The Gospels give you the what. Goldsmith was obsessed with the how and the why behind the what. This ain't about some conspiracy theory, like a bunch of dudes in a back room burning scrolls. It's way more subtle than that. It's about the limitations of language itself. How do you translate a pure, unfiltered cosmic truth into words that a first-century fisherman or a tax collector, or anybody for that matter, can even begin to wrap their head around? You can't. It's like trying to explain the color magenta to someone who's been blind since birth. The words are just pointers. The real thing is the experience. So, the writers of the Gospels, they did the best they could with the tools they had. They gave us the parables, the moral lessons, the narrative of a life. But the actual, technical, spiritual mechanics of the Christ, the conscious awareness that Jesus was actually operating from, that couldn't be written down. It was too radical. It would have been completely misunderstood, turned into another rigid law, another dead religion. It had to be passed on silently, from consciousness to consciousness, heart to heart, outside of the official record. That's the gap. That's the silence. It's the space where the real teaching was happening. It's the unspoken understanding that the man Jesus was a vehicle for the universal Christ principle, a principle that is equally alive and available in you and me, right here, right now. The Gospels introduce you to the man. The gap contains the secret to accessing the same power he did. They gave us the biography of the master chef, but the secret recipe, the specific ingredients and the precise method to cook up a miracle in your own life, that, my friends, is what was held in the silence. That, my friends, is what was held in the silence, and that is exactly what Joel S. Goldsmith spent his life trying to show us. And this brings us to the single most mind-bending, paradigm-shifting piece of the whole puzzle. This is where we have to get real and break down the biggest misconception in all of conventional religion. We've been sold this idea of Christ as a person, a singular historical figure that we look back to, admire, and worship from a distance. But that's like admiring the container instead of tasting what's inside. Goldsmith cuts right through that. He tells us straight up, Christ ain't a person, it's a permanent state of consciousness. Let that land for a minute. We're not talking about a guy from 2,000 years ago. We're talking about a mode of existence, a frequency. Think of it like this: your normal, everyday mind, with all its worries, its ego, its fears, its running commentary. That's one channel on the radio. It's all static and talk shows. The Christ consciousness is a completely different, crystal clear station, broadcasting 24/7, full of infinite harmony, intelligence, and power. The man Jesus of Nazareth wasn't the only station. He was a receiver so perfectly tuned that he became the broadcast. He was the living proof of what's possible when a human being fully embodies that divine frequency without any static interference. This changes everything. It takes this thing out of the history books and plants it right in the center of your own being right now. You see, if Christ is a person, then the whole game is about worshipping that person, trying to be good enough for that person, begging that person to intervene in your life from some far-off heaven. It keeps the power out there. But if Christ is a state of consciousness, then the entire spiritual journey does a complete 180. It's no longer about pleading with a distant God. It's about tuning your own receiver. It's an inside job of the highest order. This Christ state is not something you have to earn or build from scratch. It's your divine inheritance. It's the factory setting of your true self, buried under layers of conditioned thinking, trauma, and this false belief that you're just a separate, lonely little body bumping around in a chaotic world. The work, then, isn't to get the Christ consciousness. The work is to quiet the static of your personal, egoic mind, what Goldsmith calls the carnal mind, so that this already present, permanent state can shine through. It's about getting your you-ness out of the way so that the I-ness of God can be what lives your life. Jesus didn't say, "I am a good man." He said, "I and the Father are one." He was speaking from that state, declaring his oneness with the source. And the wildest, most beautiful, most terrifying part of this whole thing is that he also said, "You will do even greater things than these." He wasn't giving us a pep talk. He was stating a metaphysical fact. He was pointing to the potential within every single one of us to tune to that same station, to access that same permanent state of oneness, and to let that power express itself as our life. He was pointing to the potential within every single one of us to tune to that same station, to access that same permanent state of oneness, and to let that power express itself as our life. And this is where the rubber really meets the road, where this whole thing moves from a cool philosophical idea to a practical, living reality. Because if this Christ consciousness is already within us, then the entire search, the whole frantic grasping for answers and salvation out there in the world, is a total wild goose chase. It's like frantically searching for your keys everywhere, panicking, only to realize they've been in your pocket the whole time. This is the ultimate inside job. We've been conditioned, hardwired even, to look for our good externally. We think if we just get the right job, the right relationship, the right amount of money, the right recognition, then we'll finally be happy, we'll finally be at peace. We pray to a God we imagine is sitting on a cloud, asking him to rearrange the outside world to suit our personal desires. But Goldsmith hits us with the cosmic truth bomb. That entire approach is backwards. The kingdom of heaven, that state of perfect harmony, peace, and limitless supply, isn't a physical location you get to after you die. It's a dimension of awareness that is already present within you right here, right now. It's the very core of your being. So what does that actually mean on a Tuesday afternoon when the bills are due and your head is pounding? It means the solution to any problem, the answer to any question, the fulfillment of any legitimate need is never ever's out there. It's always an inside-out eruption. The world outside of you is just a shadow, a projection, a printout of what's going on in the inner realm of your consciousness. When you feel lack, it's because you've lost contact with the inner source of infinite supply. When you feel sick, it's a signal that you've identified with the outer, physical form instead of the inner, spiritual reality of wholeness. When you feel conflict, it's because you're perceiving yourself as a separate self battling other separate selves. The real work, then, is to stop trying to fix the shadow and to instead turn on the light that casts it. You don't fight the darkness in a room, you flip the switch. This inside job is the practice of turning within, past the noise of your thoughts, past the emotional storms, past the personal history, to that silent, peaceful, potent center where the Christ consciousness is already humming. It's in that space that you get your real instructions. It's from that space that your healing flows. It's from that space that right action emerges, not as a frantic reaction to the world, but as a spontaneous, intelligent expression of the divine. You aren't a beggar pleading at the universe's door. You are a conduit through which the universe expresses its own infinite abundance and intelligence. Your only job is to get your personal self, with all its fears and agendas, out of the way, and to consent to being that outlet. The power, the intelligence, the supply, it's all already in there, waiting for you to stop seeking elsewhere and to simply acknowledge its presence. Your only job is to get your personal self, with all its fears and agendas, out of the way and to consent to being that outlet. The power, the intelligence, the supply, it's all already in there, waiting for you to stop seeking elsewhere and to simply acknowledge its presence. And this, right here, is the master key that unlocks it all. This is the practical technique, the actual hota that I discovered. It's not about frantic praying or complex rituals. It's about understanding the one thing the world fears most, the one thing our busy, chattering minds will fight tooth and nail against. It's about entering the silence. Now, I'm not talking about just turning off the TV and sitting in a quiet room. Anybody can do that, and your mind will still be yelling at you like a sports commentator on triple espresso. The silence Goldsmith points to is a whole different animal. It's an inner state, a conscious, deliberate shutting down of the entire machinery of the personal, thinking mind. It's the ultimate act of spiritual surrender, where you stop trying to figure it out, you stop begging, you stop even forming words in your head directed at some external deity. You just stop. You see, your human mind, your ego, is like a loud, overbearing manager who thinks he's the CEO of your life. He's constantly making lists, worrying, strategizing, judging, and trying to control everything. He's convinced that without his non-stop effort, the whole operation will fall apart. But he's wrong. He's just the manager. The real CEO, the infinite divine consciousness, is already running the show perfectly. But the manager is so loud, so domineering, that you can't hear the CEO's quiet, clear directions. Entering the silence is you, as the aware being, finally firing that manager. It's you telling your own thinking, analytical mind, "Thank you for your service, but I'm taking over from here. Now, be still." In that stillness, something miraculous happens. It's not that God wasn't there before, it's that you were too noisy to notice. When the static of your own thoughts dies down, the real signal can come through, clear and strong. This is where the real download happens. This is where revelation occurs. It's not you receiving a voicemail with a three-point plan. It's a direct, wordless infusion of spiritual substance. It's a feeling of knowing, a surge of peace, what intuitive nudge. It's the Christ consciousness, which is your true consciousness communicating itself to itself. In that sacred quiet, you aren't getting power, you are realizing you are that power. You aren't asking for healing. You are abiding in the conscious awareness of the wholeness that you already are. This silence is the womb where your spiritual identity is born, not as an idea, but as a lived reality. It's the fertile ground from which all genuine healing, supply, and right activity spontaneously grows. It's in this profound quiet that you stop being a human being trying to have a spiritual experience, and you start being a spiritual being having a temporary human experience. It's in this profound quiet that you stop being a human being trying to have a spiritual experience, and you start being a spiritual being having a temporary human experience. And when you start living from that space, even for a few moments a day, something wild begins to happen out here in the so-called real world. The stuff that the world calls miracles, the events they write books and sing songs about, start to lose their mystique. They stop being supernatural exceptions, and they start to look an awful lot like your new normal. This is the secret the masters knew. Miracles are just your standard operating procedure when you're tapped into the real source of power. Think about it. From the world's perspective, a miracle is a violation of the rules. It's a suspension of natural law. But from the standpoint of the Christ consciousness, there's no violation happening at all. You're just operating under a higher set of instructions. The world's laws, the laws of lack, of disease, of conflict, are the laws of the physical, material sense of life. They seem real, they seem solid, but they only have the power we give them through our collective belief in them. They are the rules of the game we've all agreed to play. But when you touch that silence, when you connect with the Christ within, you're no longer playing by that limited rulebook. You're accessing the fundamental law of the universe, which is the law of harmony, of wholeness, of infinite spiritual substance. So when a so-called miracle occurs, a healing, a provision appearing out of nowhere, a harmony restored where there was only conflict, it's not God reaching down to break his own rules as a special favor for you. That's a child's understanding. What's really happening is that your conscious awareness, your abiding in that Christ state, is imposing a higher, more real spiritual law onto the illusory appearance of a lower, material law. It's not a fight. It's a gentle, natural, and inevitable overshadowing. The shadow of sickness cannot exist when the light of wholeness is turned on. The illusion of lack cannot persist in the presence of the conscious awareness of infinite supply. This is why Jesus could walk through a hostile crowd unharmed, or manifest tax money from a fish's mouth. He wasn't performing magic tricks to prove a point. He was simply living so completely from that Christ level of awareness that the so-called laws of the material world had no jurisdiction over him. He was a being of a higher order, and the lower order had to conform. And here's the part that should send a shiver down your spine. He said we could do the same. He wasn't special because he had access to a power we don't. He was special because he realized the power we all have. When you are anchored in the silence, when you know your identity as the Christ of God, you don't beg for miracles. You become a source of them. Your very presence becomes a healing influence. Your consciousness becomes a force for harmony. Your life becomes a testament to the fact that there is a power operating in the universe that makes a mockery of what the world calls possible. The miracle isn't the event. The miracle is the consciousness from which the event naturally and effortlessly flows. The miracle isn't the event. The miracle is the consciousness from which the event naturally and effortlessly flows. And this realization brings us to the final, most liberating, and frankly, the most terrifying piece of this entire puzzle. It completely reframes the entire spiritual journey and shatters the foundation of traditional religion. Because if all of this is true, if the kingdom is within, if Christ is a consciousness, and if miracles are our natural state, then the entire project of religion, with its focus on being a sinner in need of external salvation, completely falls apart. You see, you're not here on some cosmic rehab mission to get saved. You're here for one purpose and one purpose only, to remember what you already are. Let that sink in. The entire drama of sin and salvation, the idea that you were born broken and you have to spend your life earning your way back into God's good graces, that's the granddaddy of all illusions. It's the ultimate setup that keeps you feeling small, separate, and perpetually striving for a finish line you can never cross. It's a hamster wheel designed to keep you looking outside of yourself for a solution to a problem that doesn't even exist in your true nature. Goldsmith cuts this entire narrative off at the knees. Your soul, your true spiritual identity, has never been fallen, has never been stained, has never been for one single second separated from its source. You are, right now, the perfect, beloved child of God, and you always have been. The problem is never with your being, it's only ever with your knowing. You've been walking around in a state of spiritual amnesia, convinced you're a beggar, when the entire time you're the heir to the whole kingdom. You've identified with the costume, the physical body, the personality, the personal history, and you've forgotten the immortal being wearing it. So salvation isn't about a future event where you get fixed. It's a present moment awakening where you remember you were never broken. It's the dawning realization, the aha moment, where the clouds of forgetfulness part and you catch a glimpse of your own divine self. This is why the path isn't about accumulating more knowledge or doing more good deeds to earn a prize. The path is one of unlearning. It's a process of subtraction, not addition. It's about consciously, deliberately letting go of the false labels, the limiting beliefs, and the entire tragic story of being a separate, sinful self. It's about silencing the voice of the ego that constantly tells you what you're not, so you can hear the still, small voice of the Father within that is eternally declaring what you are. Your entire spiritual practice, then, is just a dedicated remembering. Every moment you turn within to the silence, you are not trying to become spiritual. You are remembering that you are spirit. You are not trying to find God. You are remembering that God is the very life you are living. The struggle is over. The striving is done. All that's left is to wake up from the dream of separation and take your rightful place, not as a humble servant in the outer court, but as a conscious son, as a living heir, abiding in the conscious awareness of your oneness with the infinite.